there was like a black spot in a brown field. And I'm like, oh, I'm high enough to see birds. Okay. And so I zoomed in on the bird and I'm like, oh, it's a golden eagle. Nice. And so my mind probably just generated that as I went, you know?
Holy cow.
The things that are out of place kind of stand out, you know?
Like, it's almost like your mind is like a whole separate thing from you and you're just observing it.
Oh, absolutely.
If you enjoy this podcast, show us some love and take a couple minutes to leave a 5-star review. It helps us get found by more listeners, and we greatly appreciate it. Aphantasia is a condition characterized by an inability to visualize mental images in one's mind. If you have just discovered that you or someone you love has aphantasia, or if you're just fascinated by the subject in general and love learning more about it, you are in the right place. The Discovering Your Mind podcast delves into all aspects of the mind's eye, including aphantasia, hyperphantasia, and everything in between. Welcome to the Discovering Your Mind podcast, brought to you by shanesbraindomain.com. I am your host, Shane Williams, also known as Shane's Brain. I'm joined today by my co-host for this episode, Cole Williams. Say hi, Cole.
Hey, guys.
And today we are talking with the one and only Garrett Sudweeks, who I just met a couple seconds ago. How you doing there, Garrett?
I'm doing great, you guys.
Fantastic. All right. Good to have you on the show.
That's great.
And to start out, why don't you just tell us a little bit about what you do for a living?
I'm a scientific consultant, pretty much encompassing everything that has to do with geosciences, specialize in hydrology, hydrogeology, geology, mineral exploration, earthworks, air modeling, stuff like that. So,
all right. For those of you who don't know what he's talking about, neither do we. So,
all right. What about your hobbies and interests? What else do you find interesting or like to do for fun?
I really enjoy the outdoors. I actually consider hydrology as a hobby as well. It's kind of my passion. I purchased some land a few years ago that's in a flash flood zone that really nobody wanted to touch, but I thought it was a really fun, interesting challenge. And so we built a house there, and putting in the flood management structures and running flood models and preparing for the worst has been a blast.
Okay.
Now, do you live at this house?
Not yet. We're moving in next week.
Oh my!
But I'm confident we'll be living there for a long time. I also enjoy rock climbing, canyoneering, hiking, backpacking, hunting, fishing, all the good stuff you do outside.
Very cool. Yeah, that's interesting. Building your house in a flood zone. That makes me feel like you're super confident in your abilities.
Oh, absolutely.
You put your money where your mouth is, right?
Literally. And my life and my family.
Yeah, put your family where your mouth is. That's
yeah, we're at the mouth of a slot canyon, so we get some pretty gnarly floods through the stream that goes through our property. It goes from 3 inches to 9 feet in minutes. So
wow.
Yeah.
So how do you leave during a flash flood?
Well, you get to high ground. We have a second story, so that's probably where I would go if I realized I was horribly wrong.
In this episode, we will be referring to what we call the apple graph. If you would like to view the apple graph to play along and better understand what we're talking about, you can find it on shanesbraindomain.com in the Aphantasia and Beyond section. If you are unable to view the apple graph for whatever reason, it is a graph divided into 6 sections. In the number 6 section, there is a very detailed image of a red apple. In the number 5 section, it is the same image but with less detail. Number 4 is still in color but has less detail and more basic shapes instead of detailed hues and gradients. Number 3 is the less detailed apple but in gray tones without the color. Number 2 is a simple outline of the apple. And number 1 is blank, indicating no visualization whatsoever. This is called aphantasia.
All right. I want you to visualize a red apple in your mind.
Okay.
Okay. Now we are going to share our graph with you.
Mhm.
I want you to tell me which one best represents what you saw in your mind's eye.
Well, number 6, but
Number 6.
differences being the apple wasn't by itself. Imagined a lot of different shades of red apples, basically.
Okay. Can you explain that a little bit?
Well, in my head, it was a basket of red apples. My mind couldn't pick one.
So does your mind normally generate a lot of different versions of what you're asked to visualize?
Yes, if what I'm asked to visualize or what I'm considering is general, then my mind pretty much pulls up everything related to that, kind of like a Google search, but not as organized. I guess it'd be tiles. And the largest tile is the one that relates closest to that, or my best guess as to what they're asking for. Or it's a group of the things, in their natural setting. And then I just pick the one that's closest as I ask follow-up questions or the conversation continues.
Okay. Because to me, the first thing I thought about is it sounds like a game of, if you've ever played Guess Who as a child.
Oh, yeah.
Where you've got all those faces up and like the more information you get, you like narrow down what you're actually supposed to be looking for.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Okay. That makes sense. So have you ever heard of aphantasia before?
Not till recently. A good friend of mine is more familiar with the actual term and its medical definitions, but at a young age, I don't really remember how young, I noticed I was different than a lot of people. And I met someone in middle school with aphantasia. I thought that was fascinating because I could not comprehend how to think without so much going on in your head. And I'm kind of envious, Shane, because there's usually a lot going on. It's hard to be clear, but my friend was very clear, concise, and direct, and I learned a lot about how his mind worked, and now I'm just able to put it into words.
Okay. So how long ago was that?
That'd be 20 plus years ago now.
All right. What we'd like you to do now is to visualize a chicken in your mind.
Awesome. I love chickens.
Me too. But I don't raise them. I just laugh at them usually.
Oh, they're hilarious. I do both.
Is it like looking at a picture or more of just a thought or something else?
It's a video. My flock of chickens rummaging around and pecking around on the ground.
Okay. Is it in color?
Yes.
Are the colors vibrant or muted?
Well, now I don't know because now they're both. I believe when I first thought of the image, it was neither. It was just more like reality.
Okay. But when I said that, did you see both at the same time?
Yeah, there were two videos. One was muted, one was vibrant.
Oh, that is cool.
Kind of like a photo editing software.
That is so cool.
This kind of reminds me of like the Marvel stuff where they're talking about like splitting realities. It's like as soon as the option was given, you created 2 alternate realities.
Oh, yeah. I mean, now that you bring that up, that's something I really struggled with as a kid was the whole concept of what was real. Because
Really?
my dreams and waking imagination were so lifelike that I thought I had a conversation with my mom that I didn't. And so she wasn't keeping her word because she agreed to something in a dream. And I thought that was real. And so I really struggled when talking to people, like, all right, you don't remember it that way. So maybe it was just a dream. In the area that I live, there's a lot of deer. I hit 5 deer last year, and I'm up to 4 this year now. The most recent one, it was twilight, and I was just thinking about look for the deer, and then I saw a deer in the road, and then I'm like, oh, that's a coincidence. It's just my mind generating that. No, the deer was there, and I totally.
That is so interesting.
That sounds trippy.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, it kind of reminds me, we just interviewed Carrie, and he talked about premature closure, where sometimes hunting accidents happen because they have imagined the deer coming out so much that when their buddy walks out, they think it's the deer and they shoot it.
Oh, absolutely. That's never happened to me, and I was very afraid it would when I've been hunting. So when I'm getting ready to shoot a deer, in Carrie's example, I've got to think about the deer doing something, and if it doesn't do that, I know it's real.
Holy cow.
Because when you're excited and your adrenaline gets going, my imagination just kind of takes off. And that's very common when you're hunting. I've been hunting for years now, and so that excitement and adrenaline isn't there as much anymore, which is a great thing. It's much safer.
Okay. So just to recap what you said, if I understand it right, you hit a deer with your car because you thought it was your imagination.
Yes. Yeah. No,
that's wild.
It's really embarrassing to admit it, but yeah, that's the case sometimes.
And I'm going to recap something different. When you're hunting, you have to imagine a deer doing something a deer wouldn't normally do, so that if the deer doesn't do that, you know that it's real.
When my imagination kind of gets the better of me like that, it's so close to reality, you can't tell. It's like my mind's playing tricks on me.
Right.
And so I've got to imagine something like, okay, the deer's going to turn left now. And if it doesn't turn left, good.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That makes sense. Kind of. All right. Back to the chicken. Is it 2D or 3D?
3D.
Can you rotate it and see it from all angles?
Yes.
You said it was kind of like a video, so there was movement.
Yes.
Okay. Can you make the chicken fly?
Not very far, because chickens can't fly very far. I can make the chicken fly unnaturally in my mind, but.
All right. That's what I was going to ask is, could you give it the gift of flight?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. It could be Superman. Absolutely.
Is the image more clear with your eyes closed or your eyes open?
I'm trying that right now. It doesn't matter.
Same either way?
Yeah.
Do you see the chicken in your mind, or is it projected out in front of you?
It's in my mind.
Okay.
I can project it in front of me as well, but it's in my mind.
Okay, because I was curious about that, because when you were talking about the hitting the deer with your car, you were talking about it as if what you were imagining was out in the road in front of you.
Yes, and that's just when I get stressed, excited, elevated moods. That's a little bit more difficult to control. As a kid, I saw monsters and people that weren't there all the time, and so then I just learned to put my mind in my mind.
Okay.
Interesting. From a psychology perspective, that sounds a lot like schizophrenia, but I know it's not.
Yes, actually, my best friend in high school developed schizophrenia in his early 20s. And before then, we could really relate because our minds were very similar. So I thought, well, it's just a matter of time before I go nuts. But I've been assured it's not going to happen.
All right. Is the image solid or transparent?
Solid.
But I'm assuming you can make it transparent if you want to.
Yes. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
All right. Can you put a vest and a tie on the chicken?
Yes.
How does he look?
Yeah, he looks very dapper. He's in a crocheted brown country vest. And he's trying to remove the tie because it's annoying.
If the chicken made a sound, could you hear it in your mind?
Yes. Yeah. The original image had lots of sound.
Okay.
All right. Now I'm going to ask you to visualize some animals that you're probably not very familiar with.
Oh, excellent.
All right. Visualize a leafy sea dragon. Describe what you saw.
A mythical beast. It's got fins, kind of like a mosasaur, but very, very mossy, and the fins look like leaves.
All right. I want you to visualize a lilac-breasted roller and describe what you saw.
Well, that sounds like a bird from the naming convention. Not familiar with that bird. It's got a very muted purple chest, and it's rolling its head. It looks like it's doing some sort of mating dance, and there's a jungle behind it because you find a lot of birds like that in the jungle. The rest of it's black.
All right. Next one. Visualize a Sri Lanka frog mouth. Describe what you saw.
Green frog with yellow stripes in a very wet jungle stream on a log. It's got its head and mouth. Takes up a majority of the big of its body, and it is about to eat a insect I can't recognize. Very colorful insect that seems like you find in the jungle.
All right. Last one. I want you to visualize a Glaucus atlanticus and describe what you saw.
A Glaucus atlanticus, kind of a drab, really large carp. But the fact that the ocean's in the name, for most biological naming conventions, it's going to be a big fish. And it looks like just a big gray carp.
Well, yeah, I love the way he thought about that, because my brain would have just said, I have no idea.
I just put the puzzle together.
When I first was doing these questions by myself, I imagined a lizard with a really long neck.
Interesting. Really? Why a lizard?
I'm not 100% sure, but when I thought of Glaucus, I thought of like the throat for some reason.
Oh,
so it's like something unique with the throat.
It's very guttural.
Yeah. And so like that's where my mind first went. And for some reason, the first thing that came was like a lizard that could like glide on water that had a really long neck.
Oh, cool.
And for those of you listening who are curious to what the actual creatures look like, Google it. Now what I'd like you to do is visualize an automobile accident.
Okay.
How many automobiles were involved?
Which accident? That's
right. That's a good question.
I would say about, let me count them. 18.
You've got 18 different.
From fender benders to, I used to be an EMT, so I've seen a lot of automobile accidents, and some horrendous ones to just like a fender bender.
Okay. That is so cool. Out of the 18, are all of them memory based, or are some of them just you just?
Let me think. That's about half.
Okay.
No. I don't recognize that one. A fourth. Yeah, a fourth. Or
oh wow. Well, I wish I could see in your mind. You're
right.
You're blowing my mind right now.
This sounds so interesting.
And it sounds like to me, since you're seeing all sorts of different ones, like you're like off the charts with your mind filling in details without them being given.
It's very busy. Yeah.
So just to finish out these questions, why don't you, if you can, just pick one, and I'll ask you about that specific one.
All right.
So how many automobiles were involved in the accident?
7.
What type of automobiles are they? Can you see each one and describe it?
So like a pickup truck, a semi-truck, and the rest are sedans.
Okay.
The semi-truck is red. The pickup truck is like a gun barrel gray.
Do you know how the accident occurred?
The sedan tried to cut off the semi-truck and was crushed between the pickup truck and the semi. And then the other sedans ran into the accident.
And was anyone injured?
Yes.
Are there any emergency vehicles at the scene?
There's emergency personnel, but their vehicles aren't in the image.
Did this sequence appear as a video in your mind or something else?
It's like a video on replay. I'm on replay, on loop.
Okay. So when you're watching that video on replay, like how realistic is it? Like, can you zoom in on certain areas that you want to see better or anything like that? Or
oh yeah, I can.
What is it like?
zoom in through the cars, zoom out. It's like a more comprehensive Google Earth, I guess. You can't really zoom in too far on Google Earth, and it's a still image. But yeah, like imagine what the wreckage would be like on the inside, the twisted metal and bolts, and where the transmission is now, and
wow,
and the person trapped in a seat that's needs medical attention, and stuff like that.
Okay. What about sound on this one? Did you hear it as well?
Oh yeah, sirens, lots of highway noise, people crying, and yeah, lots of noise.
Okay. Now I'd like you to visualize any room. Can you zoom outside the room to visualize the entire exterior of the building?
Yes.
What about the entire neighborhood?
Yes.
What about the entire city?
Yes.
Can you describe what that was like? What kind of details you got there?
My neighbor was cutting hay this morning, and so his tractor moving around the field next to mine was in the images I zoomed out of the town, onto the town. Yeah, there's an eagle. I didn't notice that before.
Okay.
Eagles
So,
in the air.
okay, what do you mean by that? You didn't notice it the first time. What's happening that could happen? I'm just trying to understand what's going on.
I'm just trying to focus on the picture, and then it's a very general snapshot, but there is motion. There's cars driving on the highway and the roads. The tractor I mentioned, and then there was like a black spot in a brown field, and I'm like, oh, I'm high enough to see birds. Okay. And so I zoomed in on the bird, and I'm like, oh, it's a golden eagle. Nice. And so my mind probably just generated that as I went,
Holy cow.
The things that are out of place kind of stand out,
Like it's almost like your mind is like a whole separate thing from you, and you're just observing it.
Oh, absolutely.
Rather than creating it. I mean, can also create it when we ask you to, but if it's very general, it's just like your mind just does whatever and you just observe.
Yeah, that really helps with my job, especially when it comes to groundwater. Groundwater can be really complex. It takes a lot of time and data to model a water table. And if, my mind fills in a lot of the gaps, if I just look at the surface structures, look at the watershed, how water gets into this water table. And then any data that I need at that point is just to fill in the gaps in my mind.
When your mind fills in those details, is it ever wrong?
Oh, absolutely. I actually love being wrong, because that's usually something that my mind just strains to fill in. And so if I'm wrong about it, that's something that I'm learning, either a new concept or missing data point. I had a job once helping an open pit mine remove water that was infiltrating. Their dewatering infrastructure wasn't working. And the first day there, the mine owners was like, all right, let's go look at the pit. We drive in, and he's like, all right, where are we drilling the well? And I panicked a little bit, because usually that conversation goes, what do you need to find out where we need to put a dewatering well? But just the general structures and the knowledge I already had, I just knew the answer. I'm like, well, right over there. So we walked over there, looked at it, and turned to the manager and was like, well, that's where we're drilling. And I'm like, oh, wait a minute. Because it was like a 70% guess, that this is the best spot. But as I continued to collect the data and familiarize myself more, that I picked the right spot. And it was a very successful watering well.
So would you say that your mind is very good at problem solving?
Oh, yes. Almost annoyingly good at it. If there's a problem I can't solve, it just keeps reiterating in this closed loop in my mind. And it's very annoying.
I've got a very specific question with this one, because I've been waiting for somebody who's exceptionally good at problem solving, because I've heard of other people that talk about when they're packing their car to go on a road trip, and they have the specific shapes and items that they need to pack into their trunk. I've heard of some people that can visually in their minds pack that trunk in a way that everything is going to fit in the car.
Mm-hmm.
Would you be able to do something like that?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I enjoy packing for a trip. It's like Tetris. So, yeah, that's a problem that is pretty easy to solve, especially since I think spatially. I organize my thoughts spatially. It's usually the theoretical problems. Like when I was in school and I'd be doing homework, I'd fall asleep thinking about it, and then my mind was just on this loop all night. And so I'd either wake up in that same annoying trap or with the answer, and then I just finish my homework. Unless I got distracted by the answer, and then I would get a 0 on that usually. So I struggled at school just because my mind was so distracting. But yeah, once I'm posed with a problem, I just can't stop thinking about it until it's solved.
I'm so jealous of that because I'm visual. My visualization is not detailed at all. So when you're talking about like packing a suitcase, as I'm trying to like visually put suitcases into the car, the suitcase is like changing shape, changing size. Things are disappearing and reappearing. It's like I could not keep track of all of that in order to actually solve the problem in my mind. So very jealous that you can do that.
It's not like when I'm packing a car, it's not perfect. There's like a bag that my wife added to the pile that I didn't think about, or the hubs. Like if you're packing a sedan, the hubs are always annoying because it doesn't quite fit the way my mind had it laid out. But yeah, it's generally pretty good. As we've been building this house, like things have turned out almost exactly how I've visualized they would, except for if what I had imagined was different because me and my wife changed our mind on something, then that initial image would be stuck in my head. So I'd build it out that way. And then what we changed didn't fit. So then I got to go back and tear it down and put that in. And so, yeah, it's not seamless and smooth.
Okay. Now I would like you to visualize 3 blue dots.
Okay.
Now visualize 9 blue dots.
Okay.
Now visualize 100 blue dots.
All right.
Now visualize 1,000 blue dots.
I'll have to count to make sure there's 1,000. That looks like 1,000.
Can you actually count them? Because I couldn't.
Yeah. It's all on a grid, and so you just count one side and the top, and then it's 1,000.
See, I lost track.
More than 100.
I lost track after 100. Once I got to the 1,000, I was like, "There's no way for me to be able to tell that that's 1,000." But okay.
It just looks proportionally. I can't tell you for sure that it's 1,000, but it's probably close.
A dork parade! A dork parade! The people point and gawk. It's not a dork parade, you guys. It's just our family walk. The sun is on fire. A ragtag mob of hilarious poems is available on shanesbraindomain.com and Amazon.
Does effort play a role in how well you can visualize something?
Oh, absolutely. Effort and I guess energy level. So that's why it's really sharp and kind of hard to control when I'm excited because I have adrenaline. I'm very happy about something or interested in something. My fingers actually start to fidget. The CPU's running at full capacity, I guess. But when I get hungry, I can feel it in my mind first before I can feel it in my stomach. It's harder to generate complex things because I guess my brain needs fuel or something. I don't know.
In general, when you close your eyes, what do you see?
Whatever I'm thinking about when I close my eyes. I've been able to clear my head, and for the longest time, I could just see the back of my eyelids, whatever light is coming through them.
Okay. Is there always something visual going on in your mind?
Yes, without effort. Yeah, there's always something visual. Multiple things, and sometimes they're contradicting. One's really noisy and one's really visual.
I know you talked about the ability, you've trained for a long time or practiced being able to clear your mind. If you wanted to, could you think of nothing at all?
Yeah, you'd probably have to give me an hour. But yeah, I could get there. My wife calls it my nothing box.
When you get to that point, it sounds like it's 180 degrees away from what your mind usually is.
Yeah.
So what is it like?
It's almost like I'm asleep. It's very calm, very clear. I'm glad I've been able to get there, but it's also hard to communicate with me or get my attention. It's almost like a zombie. My wife's like, so are you in your nothing box? I'm trying to tell you something. Oh yeah, I totally am. Give me a second to snap out of it,
Okay. So it sounds like you can maintain it pretty well once you get there.
Yeah, it's like a object in motion, stays in motion, object at rest, stays at rest. Kind of takes me a second to rev back up,
Mm-hmm. I guess what's really astounded me so far in this interview is you seem to have pretty good control of your mind. And it sounds like it wasn't always that way.
No, it had to be that way, or else it'd be kind of hard to function and communicate with people, especially clients, be a professional, trying to figure out what's in their mind and then make it clear in mine and then communicate. All right, that's what we're working on here, right? And so if I didn't have any control over that, then, they would ask for a flood model and then I would generate a irrigation design or something, whatever I got distracted with, or do more or less than what they asked for. So I have to be able to have a clear mind to clearly do my job.
Okay. Does your ability to visualize vary depending on circumstances, details, or events? Does whatever's going on around you or anything like that change how you would visualize?
It hasn't always been the case, but that's certainly been the case since I've had kids, because they're very loud and they have lots of needs. And so to be a good dad, I have to be present.
Do you tend to visualize things you've already seen before, or do you tend to create new and unique images in your mind?
I would say I would tend towards unique and new. There's always a aspect of reality there. For example, my mind, it's easier for me to learn or retain things if I'm coming up with unique and new things. Like in college, I would get frustrated and bored with my homework assignments. So I created my own homework, basically. To apply the principles that we were learning to a elevation or 3D model of Middle Earth that I was creating.
Oh, wow.
My computer. So just by the way that Tolkien drew it, I learned hydrology concepts on the streams. And so by creating something that didn't exist, I was able to retain those concepts better. When I got to geologic stratigraphy, I would do geologic mapping in Middle Earth. And so now I've got this very high resolution model of Middle Earth just sitting on my computer. So I wish it was more productive than that. If it was something real that I could actually use in the real world, then I probably wouldn't have learned it as good.
Wow.
Yeah.
Tolkien should have used you as a consultant.
Oh, I believe he was hyperphantastic. His details and his world building was just on point.
That's true.
I've got the science to prove it now.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Okay. Can you visualize to the extent that it completely takes you out of reality?
Oh, yeah.
Could you, and we've used this as an example before, could you use it to take yourself out of a really stressful experience? Like we've had an episode where Sarah talked about how she was really stressed going to the dentist. Mm-hmm. And she was able to use this to completely take herself out of the dentist to her happy place. And she didn't even remember she was at the dentist. Like they did the whole procedure and she didn't feel or notice a thing.
When I was an EMT or volunteering with search and rescue, it's a really stressful experience. So you have to clear your mind in a sense and focus on what's going on. So I would just visualize the workflow of what I needed to do, what's the most important thing in front of me, and then all of the panic and emotion got pushed away. But I would say I also do the opposite of Sarah. I put myself in stressful situations to get out of my mind. Like I got really into rock climbing in high school because it caused me to focus on the task at hand and not be distracted by whatever thoughts I had. And so it's kind of this forced me into this Zen, because if I didn't get it right, then that feeling of falling is not very fun.
Okay, I think I know what the answer to this one is going to be. But when it comes to mind visualization, on a scale from 1 to 10, how much does it resemble reality?
Oh, 10.
Would it be 11 if it could?
Yeah, I could visualize more than reality. Like when I'm cooking something, I come from a long line of really good cooks, and it doesn't taste quite right. I could visualize how it would taste better and what I need to do next time. So that's better than reality, I guess I would say.
All right. So we're going to move on from the visualization stuff and talk a little bit more about your mind audio. So would you say you have an inner voice?
Several. That's the schizophrenic thing that scared me in high school.
Okay. All right. So if you can, just try and describe that. Describe if it's in your voice or kind of what you hear, and describe what an inner voice is to you.
Well, it's in my voice. And then like if I'm thinking of an argument in my voice, I'm making my case, and then another more generic voice, or if I know a person that is an expert on the subject, it would be in their voice, is making a counter argument. Or should you really be doing that? And then all of a sudden there's 5 voices making arguments at the same time for why I should or should not do something, make a decision. So decision fatigue is really, I'm really prone to that. And I used to be very indecisive.
So do you play out conversations in your mind?
Oh yeah. I've had this interview probably 100 times in my head. It's very different than any of those iterations though. So
that is cool.
I'm glad that we've broken your expectations. That's what we aim to do.
Would you say there's always something audible going on in your mind? Does your mind ever shut up?
No, it doesn't shut up. There's always an aspect of something that's audible. Like if I'm imagining that I'm in the mountains, at least there's wind in the trees. It's not always noisy, and there's not always noises on top of each other. Thankfully, whatever I'm visualizing, even if it's multiple things, has a generic theme. They're all related.
Okay.
And
so, yeah, I wanted to talk about that. So if you're visualizing, 17 different things, and are you hearing all of them, at least on some level?
Yes, on some level.
That's interesting.
What does the phrase "I have a song stuck in my head" mean to you?
Madness. Yeah, I get songs stuck in my head all the time. Sometimes multiple songs, but that's not very common. Usually if a song's stuck in my head and then it's replaced by another earworm, it just gets pushed out.
Do you hear like the whole song, or just like a little loop of it?
A loop of it, generally. Yeah. And then I try to think of the whole song, and then the whole song gets stuck in my head. So then I try to think of another more pleasant song and to push it out. I generally play at the same time until I can push the annoying one out.
All right. So when it comes to mind audio, on a scale from 1 to 10, how much does it resemble reality?
That one's probably a 9, because I can't really control the volume, where in reality you can turn something up or turn it down or turn it off.
Okay. I want you to imagine a song that involves multiple instruments and vocals.
Okay.
It can be any song that you're familiar with.
It is called Feed the Machine by Poor Man's Poison. I love bluegrass because it's got a lot of instruments, a lot of layers. Yeah, I love the vocals in that one.
Can you hear all of the instruments or just some of them?
I can hear all of them.
Can you hear tonal changes as the melody plays out?
Yes.
Could you change the tempo of the song by speeding it up or slowing it down?
Yes. Yeah, that's annoying. It's at a great tempo. They should keep it where it's at.
Okay. Could you imagine switching instruments in and out? For example, hearing a guitar as a trumpet or something else?
No, I can't. That's interesting. Yeah, it sounds so unique. I guess I'm not familiar enough with the instruments to play the banjo's part as the mandolin or whatever in my head.
Can you make the singer sound deeper or higher at will?
Yes.
Can you imagine Yoda singing the song instead?
Yeah.
I know it's weird. It's super weird, but
yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say it's exactly Yoda because of his pentameter and the way he speaks. It's just not the lyrics, but yeah, his voice and tone and everything. Yeah.
Okay. Can you imagine the song played in a different genre? Like this is bluegrass. Could you imagine it played as like a heavy metal song?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. What I'm thinking of sounds like Metallica now.
That is super cool.
Tune in next week for part 2 of Discovering the Mind of Garrett Sudweeks. If you like what you hear, please subscribe, follow, and engage with us, and share it with your friends and family as we continue to explore this fascinating subject. For additional information about this episode or Shane's Brain, check out the show notes. Thanks for listening to the Discovering Your Mind podcast. You are beautifully unique.